Kate Nealbalcha, welcome to Irish Granny Helen. Welcome to new viewers. Welcome to returning viewers. Welcome to people who've accidentally stumbled in here. Today it's a bit of a lighthearted little video. I wrote a piece for Nate's magazine, and I hate to let good effort go to waste. So I'm putting the written version in my Substack, but I thought it would make a fun video. And so that's what I wanted to do right now. And of course, I neglected to bring it up on my, what do you call it, computer. So hang on here a second. Oh God, just nothing is simple on this stupid computer. Everything requires 15 steps. Okay, I want to talk about the year without a summer, and you'll forgive me if I keep glancing at the screen because I want to remind myself of my great, masterful literary work here. Okay, so summer is my favorite season because the days are nice and long. I love daylight into the late evening. There are about 2 days here in August where it doesn't rain. That's significant. That makes me very happy. I don't know. I like the clothes that go with summer. Flowy dresses, bare feet. I grew up in Southern California. You know, summer just reminds me of when I was a child. And summer is an interesting season because it's associated in cultural history with all sorts of intriguing gods and moments and interesting astrological stuff. I'm not going to even get into that because my knowledge is so flawed about astrology and astronomy. I'll just stay out of that. But I thought I'd share some thoughts about summer and in the context of the year without a summer. So let's talk about it. So the word summer is from the Old English, sumor, S-U-M-O-R. What did Chaucer say about summer? Talked about it being the soft sun. The poem Summer is a coming in. All sing cuckoo. I don't know, you probably had to study that in school at some point. But I hope for most people, summer evokes just this golden time of year when you were a child. I just loved summer as a child. But let's talk a little bit about how ancient people regarded summer. As with every season, but particularly with summer, it was tied really closely to nature, the harvest, the growth, and that was, if they didn't grow their food, they died. Famine would ensue, and so there was enormous importance on summer coalescing and everything happening the way it should. In Egypt, Ra was the god of the sun, and there was a reason for that. They needed the Nile, and the Nile came over its banks at the beginning of the summer, was very important to them. Summer is the period of time between one solstice and another. And so it depends on where in the world you happen to live. The Northern Hemisphere, the summer is the longest day of the year is in June. And in the Southern Hemisphere, the longest day of the year is all fouled up, and it's around Christmas time. It's in December, I believe. So that's confusing. We all have friends that we know here from YouTube who live in places, far off places like Australia and New Zealand, and we'll be sitting shivering, and they're talking about they're going to the beach because it's summer. It harbors resentment. That's all I will say. The Julian calendar, now this is Roman, Started summer on May 8th. I'm sorry, May 9th. Like, would serve me well to wear my glasses. May 9th, which for them, the longest day was June 24th. And then the last day of summer was August 10th. And you know, the names of the months and everything are very Roman. Julian, Julius Caesar, it comes from that family, Gaius Julius Caesar. July, named after him, after his death. August, named after Augustus, Octavius, Caesar Augustus, after his death. So the Anglo-Saxons embraced this Julian consideration of when the season of summer fell. In Ireland and Scotland, they started on May 1st. It was called Beltane, and it went all the way through till August 1st, Lunasa, and that was the end of the summer season. And you know, you're talking then about getting into the fall and fall harvest celebrations and working your way up to Halloween. But the summertime was long, lazy, warm, sunny days of lying about waiting for the crops to grow. In the United States, summer is considered the period of time between Memorial Day and Labor Day. We're not so concerned about the sun as we are about the sales. Memorial Day and Labor Day sales. And just to remind everybody, no white shoes after Labor Day. I have no idea why that is even significant or a thing, but I do remember people talking about it. Oh, got to put our white shoes away. Anybody who owns white shoes. Of course, people didn't wear athletic shoes, which are frequently white, when I was a little kid, the way they wear them now. You had tennis shoes, which were like Keds, you know, they were white, they laced up, they didn't go all the way up the ankle, they didn't have logos all over them. They were basically gym shoes that you wore for playing games at school. Actually, we didn't even do that. Catholic school, they didn't have a gymnasium. They didn't have any place to change clothes or keep clothes. So you just did everything in your uniform and wore your plain white Oxfords that you had to polish every night. That deserves its own video. Canada, because as with everything, Canada's always smarter. They have an extra week of summer. They start the week before Americans' Memorial Day. Southeast Asia is interesting because, you know, they have the monsoon season. And so the start of the monsoons is the signal for the, basically the end of summer. Their summer spans March to June, so it's a little bit earlier. So this has all got to do with the tilt of the Earth on its axis and the orbit, and you don't care. Nobody cares, so I'm not going to talk about that. The solstice is a big party. The solstice was a pagan religious event. It's still marked by neo-pagan people pretty much everywhere. June 21st or 22nd, it's a movable feast because the tilt, the orbit, and we don't care about that. So people would celebrate the rising of the sun on the solstice, the longest day of the year, or they would stay up late at night and light bonfires. They did maypoles. Now, maypoles were for May Day, the beginning of summer, but maypoles were for any excuse to run around a maypole, right? And, you know, they'd make wreaths for their hair, and there'd be quite a lot of cavorting in the long grass, if you know what I mean. And it was just a time to celebrate clement weather. Stonehenge, Newgrange. There are numerous places all over the world that are aligned to coordinate with the sun at the solstice. Notice how I'm not really explaining it because I confuse myself. So it's got something to do with the sun coming up and the sun going down and where it shines, and it's only once a year. I went to Newgrange, and it was really interesting because you're basically underground, which is kind of weird. There's a heavy presence. There's really a an atmosphere. It's I didn't expect it. I didn't even really know anything about Newgrange. My cousin's wife dragged me, and we were like, okay, we'll go anywhere. We don't care. It was a transcendent experience. It was really unusual. Connected with something. That's all I'll say. But they replicate the solstice. They shine a light to replicate the sun, and it's really dramatic. So it's kind of cool. Here's an interesting little tidbit. I didn't know this until I was doing my research for this. When the sun rises on the solstice in New York City, there's a place in Manhattan that's aligned perfectly with the sky. And so the skyscrapers frame, the sun comes directly through, just like it's Stonehenge. And they, in fact, call it Manhattan Henge, which is pretty funny. Another little thing I didn't know, on the hottest days of the year in urban areas, it gets so hot that the molecules of the buildings actually move faster and expand, move apart, and they actually cause a form of growth called thermal expansion. That kind of blew my mind. July, one of the most important months of the year, National Ice Cream Month, and I'm hoping that we all give it the reverence it deserves and celebrate it with the top and the bottom of the food pyramid, ice cream. And if just July is not enough, you can go to Norway, because it's so close to the Arctic Circle that there's 24 hours of daylight from April through August. And so that gives you a lot of time in July to celebrate with the sacrament of ice cream. Periodically, things have interrupted this sort of predictable geological, natural event, and everything falls into place the way it is supposed to. But there was an event, the most devastating volcanic event, which I thought was Krakatoa, and it's not, so you don't need to look it up. I did. I was pretty arrogant about it. Oh, they made a mistake. No, it's actually Mount Tambora in Indonesia in 1815 erupted, and they gave numbers on a scale, and it meant nothing to me, so I didn't copy it down. I figured I had to leave something for you guys to pursue. But it created a disaster that has been called the year without a summer, which was 1816. This is remarkable. The details of this are unbelievable. It threw so much ash and gas into the air that it created an 8.9 cubic mile atmospheric veil, a barrier in the atmosphere that blocked solar radiation, absorbed the heat, and lowered the global temperatures by an average of 5.4 degrees Fahrenheit or 3 degrees centigrade. Think about that. That's phenomenal. This created severe climatic anomalies for more than 3 years, and then repercussions for almost 100 years later. They were still, they went into a lot of, weather related descriptions, and it got a little tedious, but the dramatic stuff was dramatic, really dramatic. For example, at the time that it happened, we were already in the throes of what was called the Little Ice Age, which started in the 14th century. The 14th century was really a hard time. In 1348, the bubonic plague. I forget historical like wars and stuff, but the plague didn't just hit 1 year. It came back and back and back and back. And also, I didn't realize this, they had the Little Ice Age. I intend at some point to try to figure out how to find out about the relationship between bad weather and pandemics. I want to investigate that because there seems to be a pattern. The other pattern is bad weather, pandemics, and war. It's, 3 of the 4 horsemen. It's pretty good. At the time that this all happened, Europe was recovering from the Napoleonic Wars. There were chronic food shortages because of the war. There was no one to plant, no one to harvest. Fields were torn up. All the animals had been taken away to war to feed the military, to pull the cannons. I hate to think about it. Just bad, really bad. Oh, I don't know enough about Napoleon. I feel like that deserves a little bit of a look at it too. So you had these food shortages already, the low temperatures that came with this volcano and the heavy rainfall caused all the harvests to fail. Worse food scarcity than there already was, skyrocketing prices, supply and demand, right? And there was rioting, there was looting, and there was famine. England and Ireland were particularly badly hit by famine. And because of the excessive rainfall, rivers and waterways and coastal areas were inundated, dangerous, flooded. And so transportation by boat was virtually at a standstill. And if you think about it, I'll go ahead and say this, it's in my writing a little later, but I'll go ahead and say it now. Because grains couldn't grow, the animals died. They couldn't feed them. That's gross to think about. Horses and cows and goats, they starved to death. Chickens are a little bit more, they can wander around and eat bugs, but it was dramatic loss of beasts of burden, as they horrifyingly call them. And so there was no way to get around. Roads were flooded, inundated, really bad flooding globally. Waterways inundated, couldn't travel. You couldn't travel by boat. There were no animals to travel by. It was pretty bad. And it resulted in something interesting, which I'll get to here in a minute. There was widespread, more violence on the streets of cities in Europe than anyone had seen since the French Revolution. Widespread disease because of contaminated water. Keep in mind, sewage handling wasn't at its best. And there were a lot more animals to begin with, not eventually, but to begin with. And then the water everywhere, disease started spreading. They had an epidemic of typhus, and 65,000 people died of typhus in England. The particulate in the atmosphere made the snowfall in Hungary all year long, and the snow was brown. In Italy, it fell all year long, and it was red. It was the coldest year on record since 1659. An example of some of the things that happened. In Switzerland, an ice dam was created, I'm assuming like in a mountain gorge or something. And so much rain that it formed a lake. So this lake was there for a couple of years. And then things started to warm up a little bit. The ice began to melt. The ice dam collapsed, suddenly releasing the entire contents of this lake, and it killed 40 people in minutes. Globally, deaths succeeded births. There was huge population restructuring, a loss of population in many areas due to migration because of the flooding and the famine and the disease and just the constant rain. People started moving around, trying to find a more amenable environment. So this led to some interesting things. So in Switzerland, Mary Shelley, before she was Shelley, Mary Shelley, Percy Shelley, John Polidori, Lord Byron, and a couple of their other friends, they were all hanging out together on vacation because, you know, seems to me that's all they did. They vacationed a lot in Italy too. So they're in Switzerland and they're just hanging out, and they were bored. They were trapped for days and days and days because of the weather. So they had a little wine and a lot of laudanum. It's an opioid, morphine basically. It's from the poppy. And their imaginations, and they decided to have a contest. Let's see who can write the scariest story. Now, Mary Shelley wasn't really a writer. She won. She wrote Frankenstein. John Polidori wrote The Vampire, which eventually, became all the thing you think of when you hear vampire. And Byron wrote his poem that's famous, Darkness. It's all about the year of darkness. We're talking about a nuclear winter is what we're talking about. So that's Europe. In North America, Canada, and keep in mind they're farther north, they ran out of milk and bread because of the lack of grain to feed the cows or to mill flour. Nova Scotians were reduced to foraging for herbs for survival. They had famine. The most impacted part of the United States was New England. And keep in mind, 1815, there was a lot of the country that wasn't colonized yet. Inhabited, yes. Colonized, no. We're hearing about the white people. Depending on the elevation, cold, rain, snow, there was catastrophic crop failure. In New England, the yields decreased by 90%. So food shortages, riots, looting, mass migration. A huge population shift moved from New England to the Midwest territories that were fairly uninhabited by white people at that time. In New York, the temperatures fell below freezing every day in May, and the ground remained frozen most of the summer. In New Hampshire, they reported 12-inch icicles at noon. In Monticello, due to the crop failures, Thomas Jefferson almost went broke. He went into debt. And later, and forgive me for talking about it, it's uncomfortable, but this is what he did. I think it's important that we acknowledge that our heroes can have clay feet. He sold his slaves to pay off his debts. Oats cost 12 cents a bushel in 1815, and a year later, in 1816, they were 95 cents a bushel. So it gives you some idea. The shortage of grain killed so many horses, and the roads were inundated, lakes and rivers, there was just no transportation. People struggled to find alternate transportation, and directly led to the invention of the bicycle. So that when you think about bicycles, the early experiments with bicycles came out of this summer that never was. There was a red fog of aerosolized sulfate that hung over everything in the eastern United States, all up and down the coast. And it made these beautiful, dramatic sunsets and sunrises. I guess it would be, well, it might have been both. They became the obsession, the object of numerous artists like Turner, for example, who's famous for his paintings at the time. He did before and afters. He had done all these drawings, paintings of the sky and the sunsets and the beaches and lakes and the wetlands. And he went back and copied exactly the same places, but with the different colors. Dramatic differences. And so many people got into trying to somehow immortalize what it looked like, that it led to a serious shortage of red paint for painters. There were such violent storms off the coast of Africa that it damaged international shipping for a long time. China had, so many people died in China from the floods. Their military went into complete disarray because in some of the important forts, the frosts were so bad, and then there was flooding, and then more frost and flooding, that a lot of the conscripts, like the young soldiers, they fled. The monsoon season in India, the monsoons are the rainy season. The monsoon season in India was completely disrupted. Nothing and then too much, nothing and too much, and it caused a devastating outbreak of cholera. So it upset the world in a dramatic way for well over a year, for probably about 3 years, and then it had repercussions for a long time after that. But somehow we seem to have forgotten about it. And so today, when you say summer, I mean, the next word out of your mouth is vacation. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that because the idea of going somewhere in the summertime actually comes from a time when the wealthy people who lived in urban areas, before air conditioning, they couldn't take the heat that was trapped in the urban area in the summer, so they would take off for the countryside. uh, in India, that was very common. All of the wealthy white colonists in India would go off to the hills in the summer heat. In the east coast of the United States, there was a mass migration of anyone who could afford it to get out of the city during the summer. And still in August, it's my understanding that Manhattan is practically a ghost town. People who can afford it leave. There's a misunderstanding about summer vacation from school being the result of letting children free to go work on the farm. And that's not true. I was surprised to find that. It's true that they were let out of school in the summertime, but it was because of the heat. They had these little school buildings, no air conditioning, no way to cool off, no access to ice, really. You had to suffer. And to, I guess, alleviate that for the children, they gave them the hottest part of the year off. But a lot of kids stayed out of school part of the year. They'd come and go, and they would be home for the planting. They'd go to school till summer. They'd come home for the heat of the summer. They'd go back at the beginning of the fall, but they'd leave after a month or so and go home for the harvest, and then go back to school for the winter. So that's why summer vacation is a break from school. Now, the word vacation means freedom or empty or leisure. So it's an empty schedule, freedom from demands, leisure to do nothing. Which is what I equate summer with. Well, it's what I equate life with, but that's a personal problem. Let's see here. Oh, the dog days of summer are those hot, longest, hottest, most humid, miserable days of summer. People think it's because dogs lie around in the shade. Well, and that's an interesting coincidence, but it really comes from the ancient people who called that time period the dog days because they blamed the star Sirius, the dog star, for causing all the heat. Seriously. Anyway, summer has a sense of liberation for me. I think most Americans feel that way. And I just wrote down a few things that are evoked when I think of summer. People take trips to the shore, wiping down the patio furniture, unfurling the colored umbrellas, firing up the barbecue, packing a picnic, with watermelon and corn on the cob, beer in a bucket of ice, roasting marshmallows for s'mores on sticks around a campfire. And then camp and campfire make me think of mosquitoes. So I had to write that also. And then, sunburn, because with red hair, which I actually in real life have red hair, that's what I equate summer with, is the never ending stream of burn, blister, peel, burn, blister, peel. Yeah, I know. We didn't know. Never been a big fan of camping, and I did not. I don't want to lie. I was in the Girl Scouts, and I was in the the medical patrol. We learned how to do bandages. I liked that, and I was in the sewing. I liked that. I learned how to knit in the Girl Scouts, but I only ever went on one hike. I didn't know what a hike was. Hike was a foreign language in my family. Nobody hiked. I don't think they even knew what I was going for. And I showed up in white patent leather sandals to go on this hike. But we finally got to where we were going, which hot California, dry, dusty summer, long walk to nowhere. We get there. There's no bathroom. I was horrified. And the leader's daughter got a tick in her neck. I will never forget her getting that tick taken out of her neck while she screamed. I went home and took a bath, and I remember sitting in the bathtub. Now I was about 10 or 11, sitting in the bathtub with my skin just crawling. I never went on another Girl Scout hike. They took us on a camping trip overnight at some camp which had indoor bunk beds, which was about, it was up in the hills up by Santa Ynez, outside, up by Salmaine, up above Santa Barbara in the hills. And I remember two things about it. I only remember two things about it. The bunk bed's at 3 levels, and I got the top level, and the heaters were in the ceiling. So I basically broiled all night long. That was the most miserable night. And then the next morning, when we went outside, a couple of girls I didn't really know said, "Come here, I want to show you something." And like, I was a fool. I went with anybody. So we went up a little rise of grass, and there was a rotting dead deer. That was my last camping trip. But I do like s'mores, so I'll make allowances. So when I think of summer, I think about that anticipatory pleasure that built and built throughout the school year. There was the countdown. September was just, the pits, right? Just the beginning of it all. You did have Christmas to look forward to, and that helped. After Christmas, it was a very long time before summer came, but we'd start to count the weeks and then the days. And the only kind of chill on the anticipation was you got your report card, and everybody, it didn't matter who you were, everybody worried that you'd be held back. And I don't know, I don't remember too many kids ever getting held back, but they held it over our heads, and it worked because we were afraid of it. They did that in those days. If you didn't meet all the criteria, you stayed for another year. Makes sense to me. I don't know. Anyway, thinking about the summertime, I thought about that anticipation. And we had 3 months of summer vacation. We got out at the beginning of June. We didn't go back till September. It was wonderful, and I've never had a problem filling the time. I just really feel sorry for kids. They don't get that chance now. Okay, I think about the unscheduled time, sleeping in late, one of my favorite hobbies, not having to wear a uniform, not having to do homework, not having to deal with nuns with their clickers and their, being able to stay up late and read. I loved that. Summer meant we would get on our bicycles and we would just ride everywhere. My best friend lived up the street. There were 7 of them. At the time, I think there were 9 of us. And there were a lot of similar ages. So my best friend and I did everything together. We rode our bikes together and played games together all summer long. One of the things I didn't put in my essay was the fruit fights, because it just seemed like not a good thing in these days of hardship, but we used to have avocado fights and peach fights and plum fights. Because we lived, it was the Garden of Eden. California is the Garden of Eden, really, at the time anyway. I don't know if kids even exist anymore. I'll go for a walk and I'll never see a child. I never see a child. When I first moved here into this neighborhood, we have a Catholic school a block away and a public school 2 blocks away. And so every morning in the 80s, children walking back and forth, the kids not dressed properly enough for school were going to the public school, and the Catholic school kids going in their uniforms. And, after school, we'd watch the exchange again. Kids don't walk to school anymore around here. Parents, what you have is you've got a lineup of SUVs outside the school. That's what you have. We played all kinds of games together. Simon Says, Mother May I, Red Rover, Colored Eggs. just endless number of games like that. And we, now it seems just horrifying to think about. We play in the sprinkler, play with the hose, play with the wave, the 2-inch waving pool. And the slip and slides are dangerous. Do not buy slip and slides. And barefoot. We went barefoot all summer long. Sometimes we wore flip-flops if we walked down to the library or the grocery store or something, but we were barefoot most of the time. I can't tell you how many bees I stepped on. What else did I write about? Oh, the bookmobile. I want to hear from everybody who had a bookmobile when they were children. That's a big giant for any one person in the world who doesn't know. It's like a proto RV, a gigantic bus, but a little bigger than a school bus. Gigantic bus, with all bookshelves. And there was a guy who drove, and he sat at the front desk by the driver. And there was a woman who went to the back for the kids, of course. And the books on this side were for adults, nothing unseemly, just, adult books. And the books on that side were for kids. And kids got a different color library card than the grown-ups did. And it had a metal thing on it. And she would drive like an ink thing over it and actually put a mark on it, on a card. Then it went inside a pocket in the book. My best friend and I would walk to the bookmobile, parked at the grocery store parking lot, which was probably about a mile away from my house. And we'd walk together, no adult, walk together, pulling a red wagon, a normal sized red wagon. And we would fill it up with books. And then we'd go home and we'd have lunch. And then we'd go back to the bookmobile and fill it up with more. It was like a pirate's treasure. It was wonderful. And, you got to know the librarians in the bookmobile. And as we got a little bit older, when I was about 12 or 13, they let us check out books from the adult section. That was a paradigm shifting moment in my life. And then finally, the best thing about summer was doing nothing. Truly, just lying in the grass, staring at the clouds. Not very many clouds in the summer in California. Daydreaming, just doing nothing. Champion daydreamer. And of course, the sunburn. We won't go into that. I feel really sorry for kids today. They don't go anywhere unsupervised. They don't get to do anything unsupervised. The adults organize all the games. You never see them just outside getting together a bunch of kids to do something fun, unless I guess it's vandalizing. Just kids don't have that anticipation of summer because they don't get very much time off. They've managed to screw the whole idea of school summer vacation up completely. Some humorless, bureaucratic criminal has broken the whole 12 months of the year into little segments. So you might have 2 weeks of vacation rather than 3 months, and they just scatter them, and it's annoying. But anyway, that's my reminiscence of summertime, and then the music that goes along with it. I always think of the Beach Boys. I think of Meet Me in St. Louis, that musical. Now, I know that Denise Siegel will make fun of me because I like musicals, but I am unapologetic. It is some of the finest art of the American musical world. It's historical musicals. And that's it. That's all I remember. Beach Boys. Oh, body surfing at the beach. We would go down fairly frequently to the beach with my father usually. My mother was not a big outdoor person, but with my father usually. And you kind of were expected to go into the Pacific Ocean and survive. Good luck to you. We didn't have swimming lessons. Nobody could afford swimming lessons. Nobody took swimming lessons. You just went and struggled against the forces of nature. But taught ourselves how to body surf, and so we would body surf, and just remember that feeling of scraping across the sand and pebbles at the bottom of the ocean floor and coming out with like this road rash from body surfing. And nothing like salt water in your nose and lungs. That'll keep you honest. Okay, that's all. I just thought it would be really fun to think about summer. So, happy birthday to, I have a daughter born in the summer. She is a Leo. I have another daughter born in June. Imagine that, June 14th, for all of you who are keeping track. She shares her birthday twin, Donald Trump. It's also Flag Day. And do I have anybody else born? Well, grandchildren born in the summer. Summer's a very popular time of year to be born in my family. A couple of brothers, a couple of sisters. Yeah, it's a very popular time to be born. It's nice to give birth in the summer. Hard to have a baby in the winter because you're trying to keep them warm. They don't regulate their temperature well. And I remember my daughter born in the summer. My oldest daughter, I took her raspberry picking when she was 2 weeks old. All right, enough of this nonsense. I just was hoping to maybe cheer everybody up, give everybody something to think about besides reality. And thank you so much for watching. Slán go fóill. Slánte.